All right, it's live.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Give me a few moments as I get all the social media stuff sent in. Hope everyone's doing well. Another great week of football on the way. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to filter in, and then we'll get started. All right. And I see people starting to filter in, which is good. Got another week of football. There's another live. So how it's going to work, everyone. And again, appreciate you guys, as always, for joining us for this Week 5 preview for Section 1 in the Hudson Valley Football League. You can see I'm wearing a different hat this time than normal. This is the Valhalla Vikings. What I decided to do is kind of do what, in our opinion, the team of the week. If I have their gear, I'll rock it on the show, whether it's in our recap or in this week is our preview. And so I'm rocking this Valhalla Vikings hat on a hat that's a little bit snug on my head, maybe a little bit too small. I don't have every team. So if any of our community members want to donate any gear, we'd greatly appreciate it. But the Valhalla had a huge victory over Dobbs Ferry, stopped a 2-point conversion to win the game against their big-time rivals. So shout out to Valhalla. I'm rocking their gear this week. And now we're moving on to Week 5. And how I want to kind of do this show is we'll go over the schedule like we did last time. The games on slate. We'll actually start looking at the playoff picture, Mars, because we get into Week 5. We're now beyond the midpoint of the regular season. There's a couple regular season games left, and now teams are vying for playoff spots. Right, so we're going to look at the playoff pictures, start talking about that a little bit, and then we'll pick the games and answer any questions we have. So make sure you guys, if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up. If you haven't been subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that sub button, and make sure you guys put any questions you have in the chat, or let us know who you think is going to win that game. So with that, Mars, let's dive into the schedule. We got 28 games this week. Bronxville and Walter Panis don't have a game. So we'll move on from them because I think Bronxville had the game versus Blindbrook. That got canceled. I don't think they substituted a game for that. Walter Panis has this week off. Let's start in Double A. We have New Rochelle at Arlington in a league matchup. That one's going to be on local live. We have North Rockland at John Jay East Fishkill, Mars. Both 4-1. This is a big league matchup. Probably the game of the week for Double A. That one's very interesting. That one's also going to be on local live. We have White Plains at Scarsdale. That's a non-league game, so that's a crossover. Benty, thank you for the question. Thoughts on Maytag versus John Jay? We'll dive into that game, so don't worry about that. Appreciate the question. RCK at Suffern. That is a league game that is going to be on local live. We have Mamaroneck at Carmel, another interesting one, Mars. Both 3-1. It's the league game that will be on local live. I think it's Carmel's homecoming on Saturday. We have Yonkers Brave at Mount Vernon in the league game, and Yonkers Force at Ossining in the league game. So that's a Double A schedule. When we look at A, Mars, we have Greeley at Clarkstown North in a league game. We have Pelham at Clarkstown South, and these are all league games in the A League. So that's a league game. We have Eastchester at Harrison. To me, the game of the week for A. In that very interesting matchup, that's a league game. We have John Jay Cross River at Mayapack, which is a league game. We have Brewster at Somers and that big rivalry between the two programs in a league game, and Fox Lane at Yorktown in another league game. And then when we go to B, we have Lakeland at Ardsley. Very interesting one right there. Rye at Byram Hills. Hastings at Croton Harmon. Nyack at Edgemont. Putnam Valley at Pearl River. And to me, that's probably the most intriguing one. Or one of the most intriguing one, that matchup. Rhinebeck at Albertus Magnus, that's a non-league game. Henhood at Irvington. Pleasantville at Nanuet, and we've seen these two teams kind of battle it out over the last couple of years, including even in section title games. That one is probably the game of the week for the B class. And Briarcliff Hamilton football program at Sleepy Hollow. That's another interesting game. CD matchup, we have Dobbs Ferry at Haldane. And the CDs are very, they've been very competitive this year. So Dobbs Ferry at Haldane is an interesting. Valhalla at Tuckahoe, another really interesting one. Westlake at Woodlands. And then with the Hudson Valley Football League, Peekskill 3-1 at Tappan Zee, who's 3-1. Mars, a little Hudson Valley Football League intriguing matchup. That one's going to be at local live as well. Interested to watch that. Spring Valley at Poughkeepsie and Portchester at Ramapo. So those are the games on slate for week 5, guys. And now let's kind of talk a little bit about the playoff picture before we start picking all the games and answering your questions. And I know a lot of people have been filtering in. You missed anything, you can go back and watch it, guys, so don't worry about that. I'm repping Valhalla Vikings hat for their big victory last week, like I mentioned in the beginning of the show. I'm going to try to do that, give a little love to the programs who had huge victories, or I think is the team of the week. I don't have all the gear, so I appreciate it if people want to send gear to us. We've accepted them in the past, and I've been very grateful for that. But let's kind of open up the playoff picture. And let's talk about A and AA, because those are very similar, Mars. And you can give me comments when I kind of give the standings. But in A and AA, the top 4 teams in each league are going into the playoffs with 8 teams total. They'll be doing the number 1 on one side fight, facing the number 4 on the other, and they're both broken up into League A and B. When you get to B is where things get a little complicated, right? So there's a bunch of teams in B, as everyone knows, but it's 8 playoff teams, and they're going to be they're using a Piner system, which uses a multiplier based on their strength of schedule. So it's not just about overall records, but they also get a multiplier based on who they played, right? So it's going to be important not just to put together victories, but also your opponent's record as well. So all that's going to be important. The multiplier is really based on the preseason rankings before the season. So it was really important. I know people looked at kind of where the teams were ranked in B to start the season. They ended up going to be very important when it comes to playoff seeding. So the top 8 teams in B get in using that Pioneer system. For seed, it's the top four teams in C, removing Haldane and Tuckahoe. As we know, they play each other. And in the Hudson Valley Football League, I didn't get final confirmation, but I'm assuming it's the top 4 teams in the Hudson Valley Football League that are going into the playoff as well. And when we look at AA, I'm just going to tell you who the top 4 is on each side. For League A, Arlington is sitting at number 1, tied with Suffern, both 3-0 in league play. But Arlington has the better overall record. New Rochelle is sitting at number 3 with a 2-1 league record, and Scarsdale sitting at 4 with a 2-2 league record. And on the other side, Carmel is sitting at number 1, 3-0 in league record, followed by John J. East Fishkill and North Rockland. Now, John J. East Fishkill is 3-1 in league play, and North Rockland's 2-1. Mamaroneck is 2-1 as well. So 2, 3, and 4 are pretty much locked, tied up. Now, sitting at Yonkers Forest is sitting at 5 at 1 and 2, but that B is very interesting with these two teams. You're going to see a lot of things settled in the next coming weeks. And then when you get to A, Yorktown and Somers are both 2-0 in league play, although Yorktown has the better overall record. But that can obviously change as well when they play each other. Sitting at number 3 is Brewster and John J. Cross River, both tied 1-1 in league play, but John J. Cross River beat Brewster in that league matchup in week 0, so they would own the tiebreaker, followed up by Maypac and Fox Lane are both 0-2 in league play, but these teams playing each other. So I think 1 and 2 are pretty locked. I'm interested to see who's going to be 1 and 2 by the end of regular season, but 3, 4, 5, and 6, they all play each other. All right, so those are going to be determined by that as well. And on the other side, Eastchester and Harrison are both 2-0 in league play. We mentioned them in the schedule. They're going to play each other this week, so that's going to be a real interesting one. Followed up by Greeley and Clarkstown South, who are both 1-1. Clarkstown South beat Greeley, so they have that tiebreaker right there, but have the worst overall record between the two. Followed by Clarkstown North and Pelham. And obviously now I'm going to talk about B, Mars, which has the Pioneer system. So this is with the multiplier. The current standings right now, and again, maybe I'd be corrected, but in my understanding, the current standings, the number 1 seed right now is Pleasantville, followed by Rye as number 2, Ardsley is number 3, Nanuet is number 4, Byram Hills is number 5, Pearl River is number 6, Lakeland is 7, And number 8 is Nyack, followed by number 9 being Putnam Valley and 10 being Rhinebeck. So that's the 1 through 10 there, and the top 8 get in. And then C and D, we have the top team is Westlake. For C, Valhalla, Dobbs Ferry, and then Woodlands. The D schools are Haldane and Tuckahoe. And for Hudson Valley Football League, number 1 is Spring Valley. Number 2 and 3 is Tappan Zee and Peekskill, which play each other this week. 4 is Portchester. So those are the standings, guys, so far in our playoff picture. These things are going to change, obviously. And now let's dive into the game picks, Mars. Any comments on the playoff structure or teams that surprise you so far?
Well, I mean, you gotta be real. I mean, once we get into playoff time, this is like the most exciting part of the season. I mean, because now we're starting to see which teams are going to separate themselves as being kind of the leaders of the pack. And I mean, if I'm looking at all the different kind of leaders right now, I mean, Arlington being undefeated is obviously a big deal for the program. I mean, they are one of the biggest schools in AA, so now you're starting to see like, hey, are they going to capitalize on continuing this into the playoffs and beyond? And seeing if they will continue doing that or not. Carmel obviously still being a top tier team, obviously having that major loss against Arlington was big, but they regrouped. They had kind of a big win after against John G's Fishkill, and now it's really going to be seeing about, especially with this A and B, I think are the most unique situations right now. A, obviously, with Somers and Yorktown being as down as they have been, but I mean it's going to be a showdown, obviously, between both of them. But yeah, that remaining on that, I think is grouping A, I think is what they call it in A, where you can see that 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because any loss on any one of those teams could drastically hurt their chances. So that's going to be the big thing we'd look forward to. And B is obviously its very own unique beast. It's just, especially with the multipliers and the entire system, the Pioneer system is just. It's all over the place. I mean, it's just crazy, but we'll figure it out. We'll look at the multipliers and go from there. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see who kind of sets themselves apart going into playoffs. Yeah, and I see a question coming in from Michael Schneider. The Pioneer system is painful. You can only play the teams on your schedule. Why would an undefeated team be punished for doing all they can do? Do they take margin of victory into account? It's a good question. I'm trying to think based on the tiebreakers, and let me just bring up. I know heavily is based on strength of schedule, but it's also preseason rankings.
So I'm going to tell you what the formula for the Pioneer system is. First, the team's own winning percentage. Then they add the combined winning percentage of the teams they beat. Then they subtract the losing percentage of the teams they lost to, multiply that by the number of the predetermined multiplier, which is the preseason rank. So not very simple.
So E equals MC squared. That's
so not very simple. I do understand that perspective of, hey, why get punished for, we don't set the schedule, right? We get a preseason rank. They based it off that. But that's what kind of B has been said, because it's such a wide array of teams between the bigger programs and smaller ones. They've kind of had to almost set up a 2-league system in B, even though technically there isn't one, right? So they kind of set it up using that preseason rankings, and it does hurt teams. And I know Rhinebeck is one of them. That's 4-1. But what can you do? You can only control what you can control, which is keep winning those games, right? So if you're playing we'll call them the lower Pioneer system or lower preseason rank, you got to run the table, right? So losses are going to be a tough one, right? So you got to run the table. So, that's just unfortunately how it works. Any final thoughts, Mars? I see more questions coming in. Appreciate you guys as always. Make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't. Throw those questions in the chat. Again, it could be any of those questions. If it's just about who's going to win, don't worry. We're going to get to those in those game picks. All right. So, Mars, no more comments, right? Let's go to the game picks.
Yeah, let's rock.
All right. Now, guys, I know people have talked about, well, why do you always do AA first? So this time we're going to switch it up. We're going to start with the Hudson Valley Football League, go from the smaller leagues all the way up to the AA league. So let's dive into the Hudson Valley Football League, Mars. And the first one, probably the game of the week in that league, Peekskill, 3-1 at Tappan Zee, who's 3-1. And this one's going to be a very interesting one. Peekskill has scored 30-plus points now in 3 straight games in their 3-game winning streak, and they have allowed 6 or less points in 3 straight 14 or less in all 4 games. I've been very impressed with Peekskill play on both sides of the football. They have shown to be very explosive, and the defense is what, to me, separates itself if it's going to compete for a Hudson Valley Football League title. I really like the way they're playing, but when you look at Tappan Zee, keep a name on Owen O'Hara. He's a big-time player for them defensively. 2 shutouts this year. At times, they have allowed big plays. They even were somewhat competitive versus Westlake, who has been a very strong team this year. This is going to be a real interesting one for me, but I just really like the way Peekskill is playing. I'm going to go with Peekskill on the road, Mars. It's not easy to go into Tappan Zee and win in this league. They get pretty rowdy over at those games, but I think Peekskill been very consistent so far on both sides of the ball. I think they win this one, Mars.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. I feel like that Peekskill has been definitely showing out. Their offense has been phenomenal, scoring, like you said, 30-plus points a game. Defense has been explosive, a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism. And I feel like the groove is on for Peekskill. I feel like when you're on a momentum swing, it's really difficult to kind of lower that. So I'm going to also go with Peekskill here. Tappan Zee is also competitive. I'm not going to disregard that. I think it's going to be a lot closer game than people think. It's going to be a fight, but I think Peekskill is going to win in the long run.
Let's go to the next Hudson Valley Football League game. Our Spring Valley 4-0 at Poughkeepsie, who's 1-4. And when you look at Spring Valley, Mars, defensively, they had a shutout last week. They have allowed 6 or less points each game this season. This defense is aggressive. They get after the football. Offensively, that's where things have kind of been up and down. They like to get out on the edge using their speed. The quarterback, Kevin Dessalines, was tremendous last week. He was 7-11 passing, 138 yards, also had over 100 yards rushing, and 5 touchdowns. And when I look at Poughkeepsie, this does seem like a team that offensively has gotten better and better. You guys have guys like Jalen Lee has made plays for them. Shaheem Jackson I've seen also make some plays for them. But defensively, they've allowed 28-plus points in 3 out of the last 4 games to start the year. I'm going to go with Spring Valley. Their defense is very aggressive. Offensively, can be hit or miss. But if their quarterback play continues like it was last week, Spring Valley is very dangerous, and there's a reason why they're undefeated. And I think it continues. I'm going Spring Valley.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the same pick here. I think Spring Valley has, just like Peekskill, has been hitting the groove. I feel like they've been a very explosive. Defensively has been stout. So I feel like Poughkeepsie, even though they've been getting better, the problem is that, like you said, defense is really has not been containing these explosive offenses they've been playing against. So I feel like Spring Valley is just going to kind of pull away, and I feel like they're going to win this game. I'm going to win Spring Valley.
Go to the final Hudson Valley Football League matchup. Mars Portchester 1-3 at Ramapo, who's 1-3. This one was a tough one for me because Portchester at times have seen some very strong plays, but the last 2 games has been a real struggle. They've allowed 38 points the last 2 games. They've also scored 0 points. So it's been a struggle on both sides of the football. And on Ramapo, offensively, has been a struggle as well. Now, they had Adelson score a touchdown run last week, but defensively, forced a couple turnovers last week. Montefleur, Mitchell both had INTs. They show a lot of speed. Because these 2 teams, I feel right now, are pretty evenly matched, I'm going to go with Ramapo at home to win this game. Portchester's just too up and down for me, and I'm going to go Ramapo to win.
Yeah, I feel like this is like the tale of, like, you know, how one team is kind of struggling to find their kind of the mojo. I keep saying mojo, but they keep finding their rhythm, finding their kind of, they're feeling good when they're moving the ball around. And I feel like Ramapo at least is kind of broke out of that slump that they've had. I'm going to also go with Ramapo here as well. I think they're going to win this game, especially playing at home. It's going to give them a little boost.
Let's go to a CD matchup, Mars, one of the big ones. We got Dobbs Ferry 2-1 at Haldane, who is 4-0. And let's start with Dobbs Ferry. I mean, before last week, they only gave up 7 points total on defense. But last week was a little bit different. They struggled to stop the run. They gave up 27 points, including 4 touchdowns on the ground. It's going to be extremely important for Dobbs Ferry to get back to playing strong defense against the run, especially with Haldane, who's been running the ball like crazy with their running back in Gianchinta and their quarterback. So to me, stopping the run and doing what they do best, which is running the football and play action out of that running game. Look for their running back in Hallman, who's been a spark plug for this team these last couple weeks on the offensive side. And their quarterback, Kevin Harnett, who, even though, made some big-time plays last week for them off of play action, he was pretty efficient. Dobbs Ferry is 8-0 versus Haldane, Mars. But when I look at Haldane, this is probably one of the best starts of the season for them, starting off 4-0. Offensively, it's this rush attack. They had over 280 yards rushing last week, Mars. Gianchinta had a $192. I mean, he's been an absolute beast this year. Quarterback Ryan Van Tassel as well, 3 touchdowns last week. That duo has been nasty. But Murray's a guy to keep an eye on. At the wide receiver spot, he had 10 receptions for 107 yards last week. Defensively, they got to be aware of the play action pass and stopping this explosive Dobbs Ferry that has a lot of speed they can get on the edge. I know Dobbs Ferry 8-0 versus Haldane, Mars. I think we get the first loss. Haldane is going to win at home. Go 5-0.
No, I'm gonna go Dobbs Ferry though. I feel like Dobbs Ferry is gonna really have to have a big bounce back game. I know that their defense definitely has struggle, but like you said before, the defense normally has been striding. They've been doing very well. So I feel like they're gonna kind of reboot. They're gonna try to say, hey, let's take away the run. Let's try to emphasize, force the pass to have to beat us. And I think Dobbs Ferry is gonna win. I think they're gonna have kind of a bounce back game here. I'm going Dobbs.
Let's go to another intriguing CD matchup. Valhalla 3-1 at Tuckahoe, who's 2-2. And let's start with Valhalla. They had that huge stop versus Dobbs Ferry last week on the 2-point conversion to win the football game. And offensively, I really like the way they're playing up front. They're physical. They use a strong rushing attack. They had 3 different players score a touchdown last week rushing. Rob Poisette has really been leading the way running the football. 142 yards and a touchdown last week. And defensively against Tuckahoe, they're going to have to slow down this dominant passing attack. Tuckahoe can really sling the rock, multiple receivers. They did force 3 turnovers last week, but again, it's going to be a huge test for these defensive backs versus Tuckahoe, and can the guys up front generate some pressure is going to be a big one. When I look at Tuckahoe, Mars, offensively, they had over 400 yards last week. This is a team that really moved the ball well against a very talented team, and their quarterback, Nicole Chicho, has been tremendous so far this season. He had 379 total yards of offense and 5 touchdowns. Also, this is at home, so the big thing that Tuckahoe's got to do is limit the turnovers, get it to these receivers that have been big playmakers for them, and Banky, Bryce, Cypher, and even Liberati has stepped up to the plate. Defensively, they got to slow down this rush attack. Look for a guy like Bartolini to be a huge role in this one up front. But going back and forth, I think this is going to be another very close game. We've seen quite a few of them in the CD games, but I'm going to go with Valhalla on the road. It's not easy to win at Tuckahoe. Tuckahoe is very explosive offensively, but they have given up some plays in the run game. Look for Valhalla to take advantage of that. I'm going Valhalla.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like Valhalla, being the run-heavy offense, is going to kind of slow down the game in their favor. They're going to try to control the clock, and I feel like that's what's going to set this game apart. It's not necessarily that Tuckahoe can't score. I think they'll be able to when they get on the field, but that's going to be the problem. Valhalla is going to absorb the time, control the time of possession. I'm going to go Valhalla here.
Let's go to the last C matchup. Westlake 3-0 at Woodlands, who's 0-3. And when I look at this game, Westlake offensively, there's multiple guys that can really hurt you, Mars. 4 players scored a touchdown last week. We know about a couple of these names that have been big play guys for them. In Cali, DiNapoli had a long run. The quarterback in Pagana has kind of been a dual threat guy. Zino at the fullback spot, also scoring touchdowns. This offense really likes to spread the ball around, and multiple guys can beat you. And they're a big play threat offense, especially running the football. Defensively, this defensive front can generate a lot of pressure to you. They're not huge, but they can really get after it, and they use their team speed very well. They had a couple INTs last week. Guy Presperino has been making a bunch of plays on the defensive side of the ball these last couple of weeks. He's really kind of sparked, and Castellano is another one who's also made some big plays. When in Woodlands, you got to prevent the big play. Westlake really thrives on it. If they're going to have a chance to pull any type of upset here, they're really going to have to limit the big plays. Jaden Roberts, he's kind of been a guy offensively that's made plays for them, and Jay Castile on defense. But I just don't think Woodlands has enough offensively, Mars, to match Westlake. I think Westlake is going to hit a bunch of big plays. I'm going Westlake.
Yeah, I'm also going to go Westlake too. I feel like they've just have too many skilled players. I mean, Chris Cali has been very impressive. He's been kind of a dominant force for them for years now, and I feel like they just have too many guys that can really hurt you on the offensive side, and their rush offense has been phenomenal. Defensively, they've always been tough, so I feel like it's going to be really difficult for Woodlands to really slow this offense down, and that's why I'm going to go Westlake here.
All right, that was a C and D, guys. And don't worry if you guys missed any picks. We are posting this to our channel. You can get back, so make sure you stay with us. Hit that thumbs up. Throw in those questions you have in the chat. I appreciate you guys. I see more and more people come in, which is always great. Appreciate you as always. Let's go to League B now, Mars. And first one up, I want to talk about probably one of the most intriguing matchups in the league, and that is Lakeland 3-2 at Ardsley, who's 4-0. And let's start with Lakeland. And the big thing for them this week, they're going to have to get off to a better start. I thought they got off to a terrible start versus Pleasantville. First off, they gave up an opening kickoff for a touchdown, which is not the way you want to start any game. But then even offensively, where they've been very strong at, Turnovers were bad, and I'm expecting a bounce back game from their quarterback and Leonard. Although when you look at the final numbers, being 17 of 32 for 205 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 ints, that's not against the Pleasantville defense. That's not bad at all. But the 2 ints were back-to-back possessions, including one was a pick six, right? So this was, that's not the kind of start they're going to need here on the road. I'm expecting a much better game from him, especially even running the ball at times. So there was a lot of times that he was kind of just scrambling when there was no pressure, and having a tough time getting away from pressure and where to go with the football. I'm expecting a bounce-back game and using these weapons in Perry and Gallagher. It's also interesting to see if Lakeland can run the ball a little bit better. It's always tough to run against Lakeland. It won't be that easy against Ardsley, but it might be a little bit easier. Policastro might make some big plays. Defensively, they got to stop the run. They did a solid job, not a great job last week. They started loading the box a little bit more, kind of forcing Pleasantville to pass, which they could do again against Ardsley. But they're going to have one of their better corners, which I think in the secondary is probably one of their better aspects, up against Chenard. So I'm interested to see how Lakeland probably loading the box more, stopping some quarterback runs. When I look at Ardsley offensively, Rendy has been tremendous, their quarterback. 4 touchdowns last week, 3 of them passing, 1 of them running. We know about Chenard, who's a big body target. So definitely see if they're going to get one-on-one matchups, they're going to be throwing that ball in that direction. We know about guys like Fiore, who made a big play for them last week on a touchdown, Silverman at the running back spot. But to me, it's up front. That's going to be the big thing. Lakeland does have some bulk to them up front, and I'm interested to see how Ardsley's offensive line plays. They have been very good so far this season, and defensively, they got to generate pressure. What really bothered Lakeland was the pressure on their quarterback and also preventing him from getting outside the pocket, which was also another thing that Pleasantville did well. Ardsley probably going to look to key in on that. So interested to see that. They've allowed 9 and 6 points the last 2 weeks. Between these two teams, Mars, this one's going to be very interesting. I think Lakeland, this is going to be a close game for a while. I think Lakeland's got a lot of speed that might give Ardsley a little bit of trouble, but I'm going to go with Ardsley at home. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit better. Expect to see a little bit higher scoring game. I know Ardsley defense has played pretty well, but I think there's going to be some points in this one. I'm going to go with Ardsley in a close game.
Yeah, see, this is definitely a tough one. I mean, the fact that Lakeland had a tough game, against Pleasantville, and I feel like the defense for Pleasantville had done a great job, kind of limiting Leonard and what he was able to do best for most of the season. And it's really hard for a team to have 2 bad games in a row. And I say bad games, but it's really just about not really getting to do what they're best at, which is being able to throw the ball as effectively as normally. So they're looking to get back into the groove. Ardsley needs to kind of utilize their offensive line to kind of open up lanes, and Lakeland needs to just kind of slow that down. So it's going to be hard really to see who's the clear winner, but I'm going to go with Ardsley. I think usually when that home team is kind of feeling like they're feeling the mojo, they're feeling the mood, they're the top team on their side, and they're right now number 3 in the total rankings. Yeah. They realize how important these games are, especially when it comes to every win matters, especially in that playoff time. And I think Ardsley's going to recognize that their offensive line is going to be pushing them forward, and the rush offense is really going to take control. I'm going to go with Ardsley here.
Hey, question. Talk about Rye versus Byram Hills. Well, that's what's coming right here. Next came up, Rye 3-2 at Byram Hills, who's 2-2. And let's start with Rye. And I was always curious to see how was Rye going to rebound off the Pleasantville game. And they rebound pretty well. Had a pretty strong performance offensively. 5 different players scored a touchdown last week. And again, they're still dealing with a whole bunch of injuries, but this is what the team is going to be until these guys get back. They're going to have to balance the game around. They're going to have to throw it to different people. They're going to have to run the ball with different people. Quarterback, A.J. Miller, he had 2 touchdowns last week, but they ran the ball very effectively, and it's a lot of credit to this offensive line. When you're missing so many skill guys, what can you do? Turn around and hand the ball off and use the size advantage. Use your size to an advantage, and I think that's what they're going to do. Byram Hills at times has really struggled defending the run, and Rye, 214 yards rushing last week, Mars. Luliano, Amir White is another guy who stepped into and started making some run plays. Rama Chandran is another guy who had a strong game last week. This rush attack mixed with the play-action pass has been a pretty good formula for Rye. I think it continues this week. Defensively, they've allowed less than 14 points 3 out of the 5 games. And Rye wants to be very aggressive. They want to try to force turnovers, generate these negative plays. And that's what I think they're going to do. They want to try to create as much pressure on Byram Hills' quarterback as possible, force him into some bad decisions, get him behind the chains. That's going to be the big thing. When I look at Byram Hills, offensively, they were pretty balanced last week, and that's when I think Byram Hills is at his best. They struggled for a lot to run with consistency, Mars, against the upper echelon teams. Last week, they had 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns. So you see the balance there, right? It's not put all on their quarterback's shoulders, which is tough for a quarterback. But Curso, he had 3 passing touchdowns. You had guys like Weiler, who we know of. Burfield is another guy who can run the ball, and Weiss all score rushing touchdowns. So seeing some of that balance, I think, is good for this offense. Can they do it again against a tough team to run the ball against, which is Rye? They have the receivers that if they can get loaded boxes, that they could take some shots, and guys like Mariscott and Amichucci, who both had receiving touchdowns last week. So with that all in mind, my concern is Byram Hill's ability to stop the run. And Rye has shown the ability that they can move people. They even ran the ball against Pleasantville at times successfully. They can run the football. And so relying on that big offensive line that they have, a strong offensive line, play action with Miller, I'm going to go with Rye to win on the road. This is going to be another tough, very interesting game. But it's Byram Hill's, it's Rye's ability to run the football that I'm going to lean on in this one. I think they force a couple turnovers. I'm going Rye.
Yeah, obviously when you think about this game, is also I kind of mentioned it in the previous one as well. Every game is going to really matter, especially in this tail end of the season. And Rye is a good example of that. I mean, obviously having a battle with Pleasantville was early in the season, but a lot of injuries already there is definitely going to be a key kind of showing of that. But as people start to get healthier and you start to see the full extent of what Rye can be, and it shows you that they have a good balance on the offensive end. They can run the ball pretty effectively. Passing the ball, obviously, with A.J. Miller has always been effective. So the question is now going to be, I think what sets this game apart is the play of the offensive line versus, obviously, a Byram Hills defensive line and vice versa, right? How can the defensive front of Rye be able to cause mayhem for Byram Hills? And I feel like Rye is going to have the advantage because they have a lot of skill players that can make big plays. And I feel like the front is going to get the advantage to kind of move people around and just clear some holes and give some protection to A.J. Miller to do some magic. And I'm going to go with Rye here.
All right, let's go to the next B matchup. We have Hastings 1-3 at Croton Harmon, who's 1-3. Another interesting game to me. And let's start with Hastings, Mars. Their offense at times has been a lot of struggle, but they exploded last week. They got up 20-0, and then Albertus Magnus started clawing back. We know about Keith Capuano, who was a big-time playmaker for them on both sides of the football, but it was other guys making plays. They had 2 touchdowns that did not involve Keith Capuano, and that's very important for Hastings to show. Can other guys make plays for them in key moments? It's going to be very important in this one, especially on the road. And the offensive line going up against a scrappy defensive front and scrappy defensive Croton Harmon, for Hastings to win, they're going to have to be smart. And create some holes and protect their quarterback. And for Croton Harmon, Jacob Jones had a passing touchdown last week to Carter Schmidt. Offense has kind of been the big inconsistency with them. They've lost 3 straight. But Croton Harmon, what I think is going to help them is their defense. They have to stop Keith Capuano. He is a guy who can bust games open, but I do think they do a good enough job against him and limit the other players from making big plays. I'm going to go with Croton Harmon at home. I think these two teams are very evenly matched, and I'm going to go with the home team with the slight boost, going Croton Harmon.
Yeah, see, this was a tough one for me. I feel like they both have, like, it's almost like a coin flip for me when I'm looking at the winner of this game, because of the fact that they do match up pretty well. Croton Harmon really needs to rely on their defense to really slow down the game in their favor, and the offense needs to really step up. And unfortunately, I'm going to go with Hastings when it comes to the away team showing up and pulling off the upset. I think it's more about the fact that I have kind of more consistency in their offensive play right now, and I feel like Croton Harmon needs to prove that they can score when they need to. I feel like that's going to be the big thing. Defensively, they've been showing up. Offense needs to really kind of step it up big time here. So I'm still going to go with Hastings.
Let's go to the next B matchup, and that is Nyack 2-2 at Edgemont, who's 1-2. Let's start with Nyack. Offensively, I know going up against Rye, Rye's got a strong defense, and they ran the ball relatively well, Mars. I mean, they had 3 players with over 35 yards rushing. You have multiple guys who can carry the ball in Claremont, Booton, Pierre, and their quarterback in Tylen Blackwell is another guy who can run the ball, and also he's going to be really important on those kind of play-action passes and throws out of it. They're going up against a very scrappy Edgemont team. They're not very big, but they swarm to the ball, and they also run the ball pretty well. And this defense gave up over 200 yards rushing last week. They have to slow down the rush attack, and that's going to keep, if they can't do that, that's what's going to keep Edgemont in this game, and turnovers, right? So defensively, if they can stop the run, I think they have the skill guys where they can run the ball and control this game with their size and athleticism. When I look at Edgemont, we know about their running back Saito, who's been really good for them, and the quarterback in Larson. But this offensive line, against the speed and size of Nyack is really going to be important for them to pull off this upset. They're a scrappy group. They're really going to have to execute, and these skill guys are really going to have to step up. They're going to have to make guys miss in space. With that said, I think Nyack is going to win this one on the road, Mars. I think they just have too much team speed, and the size advantage is going to be to their benefit. I'm going to go with Nyack.
Yeah, the toughest thing for me is to see how the offensive line is going to play from both sides. I feel like the front is always what dictates this game, whether it's because especially both teams are going to heavily rely on the run. So I feel like at the end of the day, whoever wins that trench warfare is going to win the game. And I think that Nyack has, like you said, the speed to kind of, speed kills. It's really hard to kind of get to really close that down. So I feel like Nyack is going to have that advantage. And it's hard to see if Edgemont can slow them down, especially when they start get the ball going. So I'm going to go with Nyack here.
Let's go to another B matchup. One of the most intriguing ones to me, Morris, and that's Putnam Valley 3-1 at Pearl River, who's 3-1. Both teams off to a fantastic start. And let's start with Putnam Valley. Offensively, we know what they like to do, run the football. That's a big part of their offense. Meister had 177 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Caden Glenn's another guy who can run the ball and be a very reliable receiver. The question to me is the pass attack. That's been the most inconsistent, getting efficiency in the passing game if the running game is slowed down. And that's what I'm very curious to see if they can continue to improve on that. Defensively, Mars, this is a legit defensive unit. They've allowed 14 or less points in all 4 games this year. This is a defense that really gets after it, and where they could try to win is up front. A guy like Jashaj is a big-time playmaker for them on the defensive front, and they have guys who swarm to the football. And Pearl River, who's continuing trying to grow offensive line-wise, that's where they can probably make some big plays. They had 6 sacks last week, Putnam Valley. So this is a good defensive unit. The question I have is, can they pass the ball efficiently? And as for Pearl River, offensively, Mars, they had a strong showing last week. 4 players scoring last week for them. I mentioned it against a very tough defensive front in Putnam Valley. How's this offensive line going to do for Pearl River is a big question mark for me. But they have guys who can make plays for their quarterback in Whelan. You know about McLaughlin. Their running back Espinal is a big downhill runner. Defensively, this is also another very strong defensive unit. 7 or less points out of 3 out of the 4 games, right? So 2 strong defenses going at it, Mars. I'm going to go with Pearl River at home. I think offensively they pass the ball a little bit more efficiently than Putnam Valley does. It's going to be a real strong defensive showcase between the two. If this is high scoring, I'll be pretty surprised. I'm going to go with Pearl River in a somewhat close one. I think they pull away in the end, and Pearl River wins this one at home.
I was going to say the same thing. I feel like in the beginning of this game, it's going to be a very small score, if any. I feel like it'll be almost like a 0-0 or 7-7 at halftime. And then I feel like as time goes on and Pearl River, I think, is going to win the game by just kind of pulling away, by either just trying to tire out Put Valley to a large extent. And I feel like they're going to win by maybe 2 scores. It'll be a close game for most of it, though. I'm going to go with Pearl River.
Let's go to another B matchup. Rhinebeck 4-1 at Albertus Magnus, who's 1-3. And again, Albertus Magnus is an independent team, so we don't cover them like specifically. But let's talk about Rhinebeck. Their quarterback Merkel Mars has been really good this year. Another 3 touchdowns. Last week, Rand Roljan had a receiving touchdown. John Spicer had a receiving touchdown. You're seeing Rhinebeck as, again, the quarterback play has always been there, but you're seeing different weapons now stepping up the last couple weeks to score for Rhinebeck. Defensively, that's where they have been either very strong or giving up a bunch of big plays. But 3 games, they have allowed 14 or less points, right? So but it's starting to be a little bit more consistent than non-consistent. Turnovers are going to be key for them. Now, Albertus Magnus at times has struggled to score offensively, so this defense really needs to limit big plays. Don't give them the confidence by allowing some of these big plays. And if they do that, I think they'll have a really good chance. And Albertus Magnus, they were down 20-0 last week really early on. The defense stepped up and they started clawing their way back, but it wasn't enough to pull the victory. With that, I think Rhinebeck goes to 5-1, Mars, on the road. When was the last time Rhinebeck went 5-1? And to me, I think this is a huge opportunity for them. Obviously, we know about the Pioneer system. They got to win these games. And I know Albertus Magnus is not really in. There's a non-league game, but you got to continue to get those wins. And I think there's going to be one of them. I think Rhinebeck wins this.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I kind of noticed with Rhinebeck is the fact that they have been on the roll, right? I feel like they've been, this is probably one of the best starts Rhinebeck has kind of ever had in their football program. And I feel like they have been really,
at least the last few years. No question.
I mean, and they've been really showing out. And I feel like it really has a lot to do with the offensive line, really providing the lanes and opening up spots for their backs, for their skill players. And like I said, Merkel has been really impressive. And I feel like it's not just him. There's multiple guys out there that have been contributing. And I feel like it's been a team effort. I really like the way that this team has been playing. Defensively, they've been rocking and rolling. So I feel like they're also going to win on the road this week against Albertus Magnus. And I feel like this is going to kind of be that moment for them to really show that they deserve to be in that top 8 spot. Because like you said before, man, it's the Pioneer system is going to be very specific on who's going to get in. You have to win as many games as possible, especially if you're in that League B. You're in that second grouping in Class
if your
B.
multiplier is low, you got to run the table.
Yeah,
and
you got to run the table.
It is somewhat low.
Yeah.
But I'll say this. We did get a question. Rhinex O-line. Mars mentioned it. I think they've done a good job. Their quarterback in Merkel, he's really not just a thrower, but he's also a runner. And so you need an offensive line who's going to protect him and open up lanes for him. And I think he's done a solid job. We all know about, Merkel's kind of been the star of this show, but it's been multiple guys who have helped him lead that way offensively in this run. And I think the O-line is a big part of it. Any thoughts, Mars?
No, that's why I mentioned them, because I feel like they've been kind of setting the tone of the season. And obviously you have a lot of skill players that can make plays, but you have to rely on the Hogs to kind of open up the lanes for them. So got to give a lot of kudos there.
Let's go to the next B matchup. Hen Hud 0-4 and Irvington, who's 0-4. Both teams trying to get their first victory, Mars. And I'll tell you this. Let's start with Hen Hud. I actually think the last 2 weeks you've seen some growth from this team, especially offensively. Defensively, I think they've been more consistent. It's offensively they've started to grow a little bit more, and it starts with their quarterback in a bound. And I know passing has been hit or miss, but he had 122 yards rushing last week, including 2 touchdowns. And I do think as you continue to see him execute and limit the turnovers is going to be really important in this one. But defensively, they got guys like Dietz, who had 7 tackles and a sack last week. He's also big on that offensive line. We have Sumter, who's now made plays the last couple weeks. He also had a sack. Basalga is another guy who's been very active for this team. And when I look at Irvington, we know about Ken, who's very explosive for this team. But Irvington has given up a lot of big plays defensively. And unfortunately, offensively, they haven't been able to match that. I think Hen Hud is going to win this game on the road, Mars. I think if they can limit the turnovers, the defense has played at a high level the last couple of weeks. I think they make enough plays offensively. They're going to win this game.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I feel like Hen Hud has a lot of skilled guys, and they always been aggressive on offense and defensively on both sides of the ball. And I feel like they're looking for that moment to kind of capitalize on I guess you would say the kind of smoothness of how the team has been playing. Because I feel like they've struggled with a turnover differential, but once they start limiting that, they're going to start definitely scoring a lot more points and having longer drives. I feel like they have the skill ability to do that. It's just, it feels like they have to capitalize and actually withhold these drives to kind of just end it, like get in the end zone, right? And I feel like they will this week. Defense has definitely been high speed, high intensity. So I'm going to go Hen Hud as well.
The game of the week for B, Mars, and I'm obviously going to pick this one. You will not. Is Pleasantville 4-0 and Nanuet, who's 3-1. And we've seen these two teams clash quite a bit over the last couple of years, and some talented teams go at it between the two. And let's start with Pleasantville. Offensively, we know about Daniel Picard, who didn't he didn't have a giant game last week, but he takes up so much attention that it really opens things up for your entire team. Now, I can't say he didn't make an impact, because guess what they did the first play last week? A kick return for a touchdown right off the bat. So wherever he is on the field, all eyes are going to be there. And I think offensively, you're going to see what you've been seeing all year. See him in the backfield, see him out at wide receiver. But what I liked and what the coaches called last week is they kind of used Daniel as a decoy at times. And they were running the ball with other guys like Sadao and Horrigan. They were throwing it to other guys. Now, at times, you can't get drops and you can't miss on those throws, which at times Pleasantville did. If Pleasantville can limit the turnovers, which at times has reared its ugly head for this offense, this is an offense that has continued to grow, and you got to give also a lot of credit to this offensive line, Mars, because they have opened things up running the football. That was a big question mark coming into this season, and you have seen that they have been able to match the play of the teams that they have been facing up front. And guys like Aiden Picard now can throw to guys like Coleman. You've seen McPhee and McDermott make some plays outside of Daniel Picard. If Pleasantville can get some consistency offensively from other guys outside of Daniel, that's when this team can, obviously they're a favorite, can really solidify itself as the favorite to repeat as champs. And that's what I think. Defensively, this has been the number one defense in B. They've been dominant. I know they gave up a couple big plays last week, but one of them was with their backups out there. they really get after the quarterback. And I think if they can limit Nanuet running the football, which is what they like to do, which is run the football, stay ahead of the chains, and get Nanuet in second, third and long, that's where I think you're going to see him force some turnovers. So expect to see a lot of blitzes from guys like Sadao and Horgan, I imagine. Get him in second, third, and long, and that's when guys like Hudzinski, Picard, McDermott and stuff can make plays in the secondary. Even Dundee, who I thought made a couple plays last week. So those are my thoughts on Pleasantville. For Nanuet, and I'll let you speak afterwards, Mars, even though you're not going to pick it. Defensively, they really rely on this defense. This has been a very strong defensive unit. They got to slow down the rush attack. They've allowed 0 points in 3 out of 4 games, Mars. This is a scrappy group. They're not huge, but they're scrappy. They get after the football. They swarm to the ball. Guys like Cesario, who was huge for them, had 12 tackles on INT last week. O'Sullivan, is a big defensive lineman and also a big-time special teams player for them. Shane O'Neill is a guy who's been making some big plays. Defensively, they can really get after it. If they can just limit the big plays from Daniel Picard and rely on some of these other guys, got to play one-on-one on guys like Coleman to win that battle. So that's going to be huge. Offensively, we know Stemmerman and Moran are going to get a bunch of carries, but can they make plays in the passing game? That has always been the kind of the big thing for Nanuet. If they can, that's where this upset could happen, is they got to make plays in the passing game. Mars, thoughts on this? I'm going to go with Pleasantville. But again, I do think, Nanuet is a scrappy team. Pleasantville's got to go on the road. This game could get very ugly. It's going to be very physical, but I think Pleasantville's going to win. Thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I feel like the biggest thing to think about is the weather, right? I know that this weekend is supposed to be a little bit of a rainy game, meaning that it could drastically change the way.
Haven't we had rain yet this weekend?
It's always been a factor at this point. And if rain gets added in, and all of a sudden it changes the way that both teams are going to play, and that means this might be the fastest game to ever be played because it's going to be a run-heavy type of game. It's going to be who gets the advantage in the end. But I do agree with you. There's a lot of skilled guys on both sides of both teams that really have to step up. And I know Pleasantville obviously has a lot of guys. We all know Picard, but it's really good about to be everyone else who steps up defensively. I feel the same thing. I mean, you got to give a lot of credit to the way that the secondary was playing last week. And Dundee was definitely did a great job. Making some big plays out there. And obviously, Nanuet, you have a lot of guys that are looking to overpower you. So the question is going to be, who's going to win the front battle? That's always the biggest thing that I always look at. So, the Hogs up front, who's going to step up?
That is, and you know what? Nanuet's not very big up front, but they are scrappy, man. And with Pleasantville might actually have a size advantage. They normally don't. They actually might have a size advantage on Nanuet, but I tell you what, like you said, they've been improving, but this is going to be a nice test for both fronts for Pleasantville. All right, let's go to the last B matchup, Mars, and then we'll dive into A and Double A, and that's Briarcliff Hamilton football program 1-3 at Sleepy Hollow, who's 1-4. And when I look at Briarcliff Hamilton, offensively, they've scored 6 or less points in 3 out of the last 4 games. Offensively, they've had some solid size up front, and this offensive line at times has played really strong, but getting these long drives and creating big plays have been a struggle, getting into the end zone. Turnovers has been a factor. Defensively, I think they've been more consistent defensively, but the question is going to be, can they move the ball consistently on offense? Now, you look on the other side, Sleepy Hollow has run the ball pretty effectively, and especially led by Evan Bowen, who's had a really strong start to the season for them. But defensively, they've given up a lot of points as well. So it's like, which side is going to step up here? I do think Sleepy Hollow has a size advantage. I think they're going to run the ball effectively and control this game. I'm going to go with Sleepy Hollow at home to win this one.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to really depend on the big guys up front. I mean, Sleepy Hollow is at home. It gives them like a little bit of a motivation, more of at least an advantage to try to make some big plays. And I really think whoever controls that front can move some bodies around, get some lanes open. It's going to really open up that rush offense, which then can really contribute to any sort of play actions or really some pop passes, some short routes that can really make some big plays for Sleepy Hollow. I'm also going to go with Sleepy Hollow as well.
All right, guys, that was B. Now we're going to dive into A and Double A. And appreciate you guys, as always. Make sure you hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Did you do A yet? Now we're about to hit A. So welcome in. And again, if you guys miss anything, this will be posted. So don't worry about that. Make sure you throw your questions in the chat as well. So let's keep diving into it. Let's get to A, Mars. First game up. Horace Greeley 2-3 at Clarkstown North, who's 0-4. This one to me is an interesting one because I thought Clarkstown North played a solid game last week, and they're going to be home this week. They battled Fox Lane, and to me, it's the size up front where I think they're going to have an advantage. can they muster up enough offense is the big question to me for Clarkstown North. When I look at Greeley, we know offensively with Osh, with these skill guys, they can make a lot of big plays. The question is turnovers. They had 2 turnovers again last week. Turnovers has been a real ugly facet for this offense. Defensively, they've also given up some big plays, but they have the guys, they have speed, they have some size up front as well. I'm going to go with Greeley to win on the road. I think this game is going to be close for a while, though, and it would not shock me if Clarkstown North pulled the upset off here, being at home. But I do think Greeley will not turn the ball over, at least as much. And with some of those big play skill guys that they have, I think they do enough offensively to win this game, even with the lack of size. I'm going to go with Horace Greeley.
Yeah, I feel like that's always the biggest thing, is that who can limit the amount of turnovers especially in these types of games that can be really close. I think that Horace Greeley will have the advantage because they're skill players. I feel like there's more guys that contribute, that make some big plays. So I feel like they're going to lower the turnovers, make the big plays. They're going to pull away in the later quarters. I'm going to go Horace Greeley.
Let's go to the next A matchup. Pelham 0-4 at Clarkstown South, who's 1-3. This is a league game. And let me start with Pelham. And I'm going to say this. Offensively, they struggled. It's been a bit of a struggle all season long. They do a lot, like to do a lot of rollouts, play action, get their quarterback on the edge and run the ball. But defensively, I thought they really battled last week. They did offensively claw their way back into the game, but the consistency just hasn't been there. Defensively, I think, again, it's just been very hit or miss on both sides of the football for Pelham, trying to get its first victory. And Clarkstown South, in my recap, they're one of the teams that I thought probably was going to have one of the worst film sessions as a team going into earlier this week based on last week and even the week prior. Clarkstown South got to figure things out. The last 2 games, Mars, they have lost 2 straight. They've allowed 1 offensive touchdown the last 2 games and they lost. Just think about that for a second. And the big thing is offensively. I mean, if Clarkstown South, and what I think is the most disappointing is because I do think they have coaches there that know how to coach. They got talented players. But there's nothing worse than missed opportunities. And so you've only allowed 1 offensive touchdown the last 2 games, and you've lost those 2 games. And offensively, turnovers have been absolutely brutal. It's been absolutely crazy. They have had, an INT last week. They got stopped at the 1-yard line, which is another turnover. They've had 5 possessions the last 2 weeks where they've gone inside the 20-yard line and have come away with 0 points. I mean, you could do all the spread stuff, all the spread concepts, all the numbering concepts. Like, hey, if they have a light box, we'll run it. If they have a light secondary, we'll throw it out there. But when you get into the red zone, you got to get what's called ugly yards, and that's where you got to execute. The space is reduced. You got to be smart where the football is going. When you're running the ball, you really got to churn your legs. As an offensive lineman, you really got to drive your feet, stay on your block, and when you're passing, you got to make quick decisions. And not be reckless. And that's what South has to do because defensively, I thought this defense has played really strong the last couple weeks. They only given up 1 offensive touchdown. They forced turnovers. They've come up with key stops. Special teams is another one. Last week really hurt them. 2 extra points blocked, a kick return touchdown given up. So there's a couple phases that really need some tuning, but I do think they have the coaching and the skill to rebound. But to me, they got to show it, right? Because once is a bounces in football, Mars. If it happens once, the ball can bounce in a weird way. Like those things happen. We call them accidents. But 2 times in a row, that's a trend. And so that has to get fixed quickly. But I am going to go with Clarkstown South. I think this is a week where they can really defensively against a struggling offense, I think will play well. Offensively, they got to get sharper and execute better.
Yeah, I mean, like that. I kind of look at that the same way. I mean, Clarkstown South has all the skill guys, and the defense has been outstanding, basically for the most part. But their offense has been such a struggle that they can't finish drives. They're turning the ball over. They're getting in the red zone and they can't, and then they just blow it. I mean, at the end of the day, like they have to just finish a drive, and all of a sudden they'd be a dominant team because their defense has been showing out. They just can't finish a drive. So, and you saw that last week. I mean, it was a battle, it was a fight, but they didn't let an offensive touchdown.
The game last week.
It was like there was no offensive touchdown. They controlled the game last week
and didn't win.
I know, which is kind of outrageous, but yeah, can I see them being more efficient? Of course I can, because at the end of the day, their offense has just been stagnant. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that's the problem. But I am going to go with South. I feel like they're Clarkstown South. I feel like they have the full capability of doing very well. It's just, can you just limit the turnovers, be efficient, score in the red zone. I mean, all that stuff is pretty straightforward. I mean, they can definitely do it. I know they can. They have the skill guys to do it. So I think we'll go Clarkstown South here.
Let's go to, in my opinion, the game of the week for this class, and that is Eastchester 4-1 at Harrison, who is 3-2. Big league matchup, and let's start with Eastchester, Mars. Offensively, it all starts with their quarterback in Schultz, who's really a dual threat guy for them at this point, getting more and more comfortable. He had 3 touchdowns last week, and their wide receiver McCloskey has kind of been the number one target for them. But they like to run the ball, and they struggled running the ball up the middle because of the size of Brewster. So what they did is they went out on the edge, and it was successful for them. They also came up with some big pass plays. They're going up against another very difficult front. Harrison's front is strong, and they're not easy to run against. So I do think running between the tackles is going to be difficult. Now the question is, can they pass block, and can they get out on the edge like they did against Brewster, against Harrison, which again is going to be a struggle. So we're going to see, can Eastchester make this play? This is definitely a step up in size and strength, which they faced last week against Brewster, but Harrison I think has a little bit more speed than Brewster, and so going to be really interesting dynamic for this offense. Schultz is going to be the huge X factor, using his legs, using his arm, making correct decisions. They can't turn the ball over. They had way too many penalties last week, Mars. That will kill them in this game if that happens again. Defensively, Mars could be the best defensive unit. I don't like give away my rankings, so that's for my Patreon group. But I will say this. I have Eastchester's defense ranked number 1 right now in A. They've allowed 7 or less points in 4 straight games. They've had a couple INTs last week. This defense really gets after it. Multiple guys get after the football on this team. They have a lot of team speed. They're not huge, but they're not small either. So they really get after it. And for me, they got to slow down their run game. Get Harrison behind the chains and throwing the football behind the chains. That's not where Harrison wants to be. Harrison wants to run the football effectively, whether it's running out of spread, running out of the option stuff. But when they're into the second, third, and long, and they go into spread and just start slinging the ball around, I don't think Harrison is that comfortable. They've shown at times to turn the ball over. So that's where Eastchester wants to get him at. They want this to be a speed game. And definitely have to be aware of McLaughlin out on the outside. Don't let him get into open space. When I look at Harrison, running the ball last week was a struggle. They had to pass it probably more than they wanted to, and they had a couple turnovers. And that's what's been hurting them as well, is when they can't run the ball with consistency. Can they make up enough plays in the passing game? They have to be a little bit more efficient. Three INTs last week is going to be killer for them. So I'm looking at their running game and Barcella and Prupi and their quarterback in Citro. Can they be a little bit more consistent and go off a play action, get ahead of the chains and throw out of it, maybe take a couple of deep shots with McLaughlin, but they just have to be smarter with the football. Turnovers is something that has hurt them as well. They really battled. Defensively, Mars, they took Somers to the limit last week, right? They made it very difficult to run the ball, and I think that's going to be really important, but can they generate pressure on Schultz is going to be huge, right? And I do think they have the front to do it. They have the secondary guys who are very aggressive, at times too aggressive. They like to jump routes, which can leave open receivers. But this is going to be an absolute slugfest, in my opinion, against 2 very strong defenses. This one could go either way. I think it's going to be close for a long time. But I do think Harrison is going to win this one at home. I think this might, Eastchester is a very solid team. They could be the second best team, I think, in this side of the league. Could be number 1 if they win this one. But I think they are the second best team right now. I think Harrison still edges them a little bit. I think they're going to be a little bit bigger up front. They're going to control the line of scrimmage a little bit more. I'm going to go with Harrison in a close game. 2 good defensive units.
Yeah, this is the biggest. I think this definitely one of the biggest games of the year, especially in A, because the fact is it has major playoff really implications. I mean, the fact is whoever wins this game kind of, I'm not going to say runs away with it, but kind of has a lead in that number 1 spot. Whether Eastchester will continue being number 1 or Harrison can jump up into that number 1 spot. I mean, the biggest thing I see right away is that Eastchester is going to have a major test on their offensive line, trying to slow down or really have a kind of a stalemate against Harrison's defensive front. I mean, this is going to be the best defensive front they play all year, and I feel like this is going to be a battle of the trenches. And I feel like for Harrison, I kind of feel like it's like a plea to you. Like, hey, why don't you stick to what you do best? Run the ball, right? I know that's going to be tough to do with Eastchester's top-rated defense, and I do agree with you. I feel like Eastchester is the number 1 defense based on stats alone, but they've just been extremely aggressive and trying to slow everything down. So I feel like whoever can win the front, whether it's offense or defensive front, is going to really have the advantage because both teams are going to want to run the ball, right? It's going to be about who can set themselves apart. If Eastchester can force Harrison to get into the pass, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to try to get a turnover and get the ball back on their way. And then for that reason, I'm going to go with Eastchester. I think Eastchester is going to win this game. Defense wins championships. Defense will also win games, especially when two-run heavy teams go at it. I'm going with Eastchester.
Interesting. Very interesting. Let's go to the next A matchup. John Jay Cross River, 2-2 at Mahopac, who's 3-2. This is another league game and a really important one. And let's start with John Jay Cross River. Offensively, the big question to me is a couple things. Turnovers, which have really hurt them at times, and offensive line play. They're going to be undersized. No question about it. Mahopac is bigger than them. Can this offensive line hold up, and can they muster up enough big plays? I do think they have the speed to get out on the edge and make some big plays. Mahopac has at times, you can move the ball on them. We've seen a bunch of teams do it. But what they do a really good job is forcing turnovers. So it's going to be really important for this Cross River team not to turn the ball over if they want to pull off this upset. I think Mahopac, this is a homecoming for them, is heavy favorites in this game. I think, again, John Jay Cross River offensively has at times struggled. Defensively, this secondary is probably one of their best units. They've had 5 INTs this year. You have Macrolease, you have Arfige, you have Savastano. Who are they going to match up against? Kearney is going to be the big one. And defensively, they're going to have to be smart, and they're going to have to be strategic. And Mahopac, what they like to do is obviously running the ball with Koch is their number one priority, which I do think is going to be a heavy indicator here. But passing the ball, they like to put Kearney, especially into the boundary, as a solo receiver and then see where the DB is on him, right? If he's playing off, they might run an out or might run a stop right at the sticks. And if he's playing up, they'll run a go right? So South did an interesting thing last week where they tried to mess with them where the corners was moving around. And I think that's something that Cross River is going to have to do. A second thing is, if they have a flat defender underneath Kearney, how do they use him? Do they use him to jam? Do they use him to go underneath? Do they blitz him off the edge? Don't have that second guy do nothing, right? Doing nothing doesn't serve a purpose, either help or blitz or something, right? So I want to see what Cross River does on that solo receiver side. It's going to be huge because they're going to have to load the box against Koch, who they're going to have to stop the run first, right? So you're going to have some guys on an island. You got to put your best guy out there and see if he can make plays. Maybe try to force turnover too, but they got to generate some pressure, use their speed to their advantage. When I look at Mahopac, they didn't score an offensive touchdown last week. It was very mixed offensively, but other key factors stepped up. Kearney is a big one. He had a kick return touchdown, a pick six. He's a big play wide receiver for them, which they kind of put on an island at times. And they'll say, go win this one-on-one battle, throw jump balls to him, right? And he'll win those one-on-one battles. But to me, I think this is going to be a heavy Koch day. They have a size advantage up front, Morris. They're going to be running the ball with Koch, using their size to advantage, getting Koch off tackle and out on the edge, kind of wear down Cross River, and then take some big shots in the passing game with Kearney. To me, I think it's an obvious one. But defensively, Morris, they have been a bend but force turnovers, right? So it's not a bend, don't break. They would bend, but they like to force a lot of turnovers. They have forced turnovers in every game this season defensively. Special teams is another one. Pinto has been an absolute weapon as a kicker and a punter. Keep an eye on him. Talked about him the last couple of weeks. Special teams has been a key factor. There was a big reason why they won last week. He had 2 field goals, and they blocked 2 extra points. I'm going Mahopac, by the way. I think they have a side advantage. I think they're a heavy favorite at home. You know, for Cross River to win, they're going to have to force turnovers, and they're really going to have to play up to their size on this one and be smart. But I think Mahopac's going to win the trenches and win this game.
Yeah, I mean, like when I look at this game, it's I keep saying this for almost every game, playoff implications, right? I mean, this is a big game for both teams. You have Mahopac that's trying to get themselves into that number 3 spot, and I feel like when it comes to like the 3, 4, 5, 6 on that grouping, you know, they're so close. It's really a 1 win away from changing the entire framework of the standings. So Mahopac's playing for a big game here. It's a homecoming game, so it's always going to get rowdy in Mahopac. And you know, they, like you said before, they didn't score an offensive touchdown in the last game, and you know they still found a way to win. And it was a lot of it has to do with special teams and defense, like you said, forced turnovers. So you know, when it comes to John Jay Cross River, limit the turnovers. Try to be more efficient with the ball. Try to use your speed to your advantage, and maybe try to get, you know, if you need to like claw your way to get score points, then do it. Like you don't have to make a big play to do it, because a lot of times those big plays don't necessarily land. They usually cost in turnovers. And I do think that Mahopac is going to cause some turnovers. I think that special teams is going to show up again, and I feel like the size advantage is going to be too much. Koch is a hell of a player, so He didn't really have as much of a showing last week, but I think this week he will show out. I think I'm going to go Mayapack as well.
Yeah, and this is kind of for every. I see a lot of undersized teams or non-favorite teams. And this is league-wide. This is for all the leagues. Just compete. I mean, that's a big thing. Is sometimes you can change victories and just by out-competing, out-hustling, running to the football, not giving up when things go bad. And that's something that I say league-wide, no matter what, is sometimes you see these bigger teams, they kind of muscle you a little earlier, and then they wave the white flag. And, that's the one thing that I hate seeing, even for these smaller teams. Just keep competing, right? Because you never know what could happen. Speaking of underdogs, we got another A matchup. Brewster 2-2 at Somers, who's 4-1. This is a big rivalry. These two teams have played each other a lot of times over the years. And let's start with Brewster. Offensively, I talked about it last week. My concern about Brewster is if they get down. And can they generate enough big plays on offense, kind of running outside of the muddle huddle type offense at times that they run. And you know what? They made some plays last week in the normal style offense, throwing the ball, running the ball, but they couldn't finish drives. And that was a big part. Turnovers was another thing. And they cannot do that against Somers. If they want to pull off the upset, they need to control the football, make enough plays offensively and defensively, which has been a very strong unit. We know about guys like Lamaro and his defensive line, who has some good size to him. They have to limit the running game with a guy like Kelly, and they have to match up on Palazzolo, because he has been wrecking teams in the passing game. That has been their number one target. You have to force Sullivan to go somewhere else. They cannot allow Palazzolo to kill them out of the slot. So tackling in space is going to be so important because they do have to load up the box to stop the run early, which means Somers likes to throw his RPOs and kind of the quick game to the outside to act as an extension of the run. It's going to mean Brewster's going to really have to tackle well and swarm to the football. When I look at Somers, their quarterback in Sullivan, he was very efficient last week. Even though they couldn't run the ball very well against Harrison, he was really efficient. I think that was a big difference between Harrison and the game versus Mayapack, is when they couldn't run the ball, their passing game struggled as well because they weren't efficient. Last week, they were very efficient. He did a very good job. And they've been adding more and more to his plate. He's been running the football more. He's been throwing the ball, getting it out of his hands quickly. And I think that's going to be a big thing. I don't think running the ball is going to be that easy, but I do think they're going to, again, use the passing game as an extension of the run. Palazzolo Mars has had a 100-yard receiving game in 2 straight games. Defensively, they have been very good. Forced 3 turnovers last week. Iglesias had an INT. Valencia had an INT. This is a defense that can really get after it. And if they get Brewster behind, where Brewster has to really start throwing the ball, I think they can force some more turnovers again. I am going to go with Somers at home. I do think, again, the consistency on offense matched with this defensive front 7 and the secondary that has forced some turnovers, I think Somers wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's going to be really dependent on how well Somers' defense plays and gets a lot of turnovers, and I really think they will kind of dictate this game based on how well defense goes, but I feel like it's also going to be about the offensive line for Somers to really kind of move bodies around. I know Brewster has size, which their defense has been pretty solid throughout the year, but I feel like if they can kind of, their offensive line can get some bodies moving around and the rush offense starts to develop, then I feel like this game might get pulled away pretty quickly. But if Brewster's defensive front can slow down the run, very similar to like what Harrison did, then, I mean, at the end of the day, that means that Sullivan has to step up, which he did before. So I think Somers has a lot of going for it for them, and their offense and their rush offense and pass offense have been very good. So, I mean, if one goes down, the other one is always going to be there to back them up. So I'm also going to go with Somers too. I feel like at home, you're always going to have a really rowdy game in Somers, but I think they have the advantage here.
Let's go to the last A matchup. Fox Lane, who's 2-2 at Yorktown, who's 5-0. And when I look at Fox Lane, Mars, offensively is where things have been inconsistent for them. Last week, though, Ben Rotolo really stepped up. He had 90 yards rushing, made some big plays. He had a rushing touchdown. Their quarterback in Cernick had a nice pass touchdown to Rudolph. And defensively, I think where they've been more consistent, they made enough plays on the defensive side of the ball. They are dealing with, I saw a couple guys banged up for Fox Lane, but against Yorktown on the road, you're really going to have to try to control the clock here because Yorktown has a very explosive offense. You got to try to control the clock and limit big plays, and that's going to be the big thing. Interested to see how they match up against the size and strength of Yorktown up front. Again, preventing big plays is going to be a big one because if they start giving up these long touchdown passes, it's going to be a long night for Fox Lane because I don't know offensively if they can be as explosive. So limiting big plays and controlling the ball is going to be huge for Fox Lane. With Yorktown, I really am been impressed with Yorktown. They could beat you multiple ways. One week it could be running the ball with Del Vecchio. Another one could be passing the ball with Gonzalez, and they have weapons, with Costello and stuff like that. But again, Yorktown, balance is key, and limiting penalties is key. And if they can consistently do that, they're one of the best teams. I think they are a top 2 team in the entire class of A when they play at a high level, and might even be number 1 if they play error-free football. So defensively, they really like to get after you. They've had a bunch of sacks and INTs this year. It's multiple guys who have stepped up and made plays each and every week. Vogel's obviously led the charge, but multiple guys have contributed to them. Look for them to try to get Fox Lane a bunch of negative plays, and that's where the turnovers start. I'm going to go with Yorktown at home. They go to 6-0. Very impressive start to the season.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like Yorktown's defense has been top-notch, and they are just going to limit the amount of plays that Fox Lane can run efficiently. And I feel like you said before, if they can limit penalties and just dumb mistakes, I feel like their offense can be just dominant, right? They have already shown to be a very efficient and very high-scoring offense, but if they just limit the mistakes, I mean, they can really dominate and just kind of be one of the most prolific offenses in Class A. So I'm going to go with Yorktown here.
All right, guys, let's go to the last group, the AA group. Appreciate you guys for tuning in always. Always love if you're talking football. If you have any questions, make sure to throw it in the chat as we're going to the last section. If you missed anything, don't worry. You can always go back. This is going to be posted on our channel, and you can catch all our game picks as well as we talked about the playoff picture earlier in the show. Let's continue, Mars. AA, another interesting one. This is a repeat from last year's playoffs. New Rochelle 2-3 at Arlington, who is 5-0. And New Rochelle's offense opened up last week, made some big plays. They had a huge pass play over the top out of play action. They got out on the edge. They're able to, again, wake up, and that's going to be huge. Against Arlington, that has a very high-powered offense, you're going to have to score some points. So it was really nice to see them. They got to use their speed to their advantage because, which is very strange to say, they're at a size disadvantage against Arlington. Normally, New Rochelle is not smaller than people, but Arlington is going to be big. And how do you handle that up front? You got to get the ball out on the edge. That's going to be a big thing. And making plays in the passing game, which they did last week, going to have to do it again this time around. Defensively, they got to stop the run is going to be so important. Play action pass also hurt them last week, even against Scarsdale. Arlington can do that as well. So they got to be wary of that or the play action stuff. Keeping Resigno in the pocket is going to be vital for New Rochelle if they want to try to pull off this upset. So that's going to be key for them. And when I look at Arlington, offensively, they've been very dominant. To me, it's still behind that rush attack, and that's using Resigno as a runner, both as a runner and a passer. Their running back in Davenport is another guy. That combination running the football has been extremely deadly against teams with the size of the linemen up front and their ability to move people. I mean, this team has had 7 wide receivers more score a touchdown this year. So they throw the ball to a whole bunch of people, right? So that's the thing, is they can run the ball. Play action pass could be huge for them. Defensively, this is a defense that has also been really stepping up, and they have to limit the big plays from New Rochelle and the speed of New Rochelle. The defensive line of McGann is another one. Can they get pressure and create some negative plays? Finn has been someone who's very active for Arlington as well. They have been a dominant team on both sides of the football. I think Arlington at home is going to win this one as well. They limit the big plays at New Rochelle. They run the ball and control the clock. Arlington wins this game.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to agree with you. I feel like Arlington at home, they're kind of been on a roll. The rush offense has been very good, and I feel like they just are kind of loaded with a lot of guys, a lot of playmakers, a lot of skill players. Their offensive line has been dominant. Obviously, Resigno has been playing very well, and especially when running the ball. So I feel like New Rochelle's only chance to slow this team down is to limit the run, you really contain Resigno, contain this rush offense, and force the pass to have to win the game. But I feel like even that being the case, I feel like Arlington's going to kind of control the game, and they're going to kind of just run downhill and control the time of possession. So I'm going to go with Arlington as well.
The game of the week for AA is this one, Mars. North Rockland 4-1 at John Jay's Fishkill 4-1. Huge league matchup. Let's start with North Rockland. Offensively, it's this rush attack. That's where they really thrive. 241 yards rushing last week. That's going to be key. A couple weeks ago, John Jay's Fishkill struggled to stop the run against Carmel. So can North Rockland run the ball effectively? It's going to be very important. But the big thing is turnovers, Mars. North Rockland has turned the ball over ridiculously these last 2 games. They had 2 more turnovers last week. They also got stopped on 4th down, I think, 3 or 4 times. So you're talking about around, if we're going to include those as turnovers, around 11 or 12 turnovers the last 2 games. That's That's crazy. They can't, if they turn the ball over, they're going to lose this game. So they got to be smart protecting the football. And it starts with that rush attack. I know Savor has been tremendous. He had a really strong game last week. Vasquez is another one running the football who can make plays for you. And then throwing the ball to guys, big play guys like Farrar, is kind of how this offense runs. But they have to protect the football. Way too many stops on fourth down. Way too many turnovers. Defensively, I think this is a really strong defensive unit. They have really showed up a bunch of games this year. They had a shutout last week. Forced 4 turnovers. Keeping Feliciano in the pocket. They love to do a lot of rollouts, design rollouts. They have to limit them, getting to the outside here. And the screen game, you have to be wary of the screen game. If you're too over-aggressive, East Fishkill does a really good job in the screen game. Be wary of that. When I look at East Fishkill offensively, 428 yards last week, Mars. We know about Feliciano, had 3 touchdowns. He's kind of the engine of this offense. But what I liked is they showed the ability to run. It wasn't all on Feliciano. You had Rossi at 163 yards last week. You have Crouch, who made some big plays for them. Other guys stepping up in the run game and seeing if they can run the football is going to be huge. This offensive line is going to have to play really well. Defensively, they did give up some big pass plays last week, so you got to be wary. Don't let Farrar get wide open on you. But can they step up and stop the run is going to be the big one. With a stud like Savor, who killed them in the playoffs last year, back again this time around. They really have to rally and wrap up guys like Crouch and Gliotti. These guys are going to have to rally to the football, make some big-time plays. You can't tackle Savor with one guy, so you really have to get him early. He gets to the second level, he's hard to stop. With all that being said, really like this matchup here. This is going to be a real intriguing one. The turnovers makes me very nervous about North Rockland. I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill. They have, unfortunately, like I said, once is an accident, Mars, but when you're turning the ball over like this is a trend. They get that reckless with the football. I think East Fishkill capitalizes. I'm going with John Jay.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to go the same way. I feel like John Jay has been more efficient recently, and I feel like their offensive line has been making some big plays. They really need to step up big time in this situation because, North Rockland has some size to them. They're going to have ability to really move people around, and I feel like whoever can own that front is going to really set the stage for this game. John Jay's defense has been pretty solid. I feel like they need to kind of take control, and they need to cause some turnovers because, like you said before, North Rockland has been kind of having a big issue with that. I feel like John Jay is going to take advantage. I'm going to go with John Jay's Fishkill.
All right, let's go to the next one. White Plains 0-4 at Scarsdale, who's 2-2. Mars, I thought White Plains really battled last week. This is another team that has a lot of inexperience trying to continue to grow and get better. At times, they've been impressive on offense. At times, they've been impressive on defense, but they can't put it all together. And when I look at Scarsdale, guys like Knopp and this defense really need to step up. They gave up way too many big plays last week. Look for this defense to rebound. I'm going to go with Scarsdale at home. This is a non-league game, but a game that they need to get back on track, playing good defense and running the ball efficiently. I'm going to go with Scarsdale.
Yeah, I'm going to go the same thing. I think Scarsdale's defense is definitely going to bounce back. Their offensive line is going to step up, and I feel like they're going to just kind of own the game in the time of possession. I'm going to go Scarsdale as well.
Let's go to the next AA, RCK 1-3 at Suffern, who's 3-1. This is a league game. And how about RCK, Mars? Offensive line had a tremendous game last week, really moving people around. They had 4 rushing touchdowns led by Eaglet. It's going to be a big thing running the ball. Suffern struggled to run the ball, stop the run last week for the most part. Did a really good job of keeping North Rockland out of the end zone, but struggled to stop the run. RCK is going to have to run the ball effectively if they want to try to pull off the upset. And when I look at Suffern, offensively, the pass attack needs to rebound. They had 4 turnovers last week. They were able to run the ball with Jeff Joseph at 116 yards rushing. This offense can't turn the ball over. They got to be much more efficient. Look for this offensive line to rebound and again, dictate things up front. Defensively, this is another strong defensive unit. And I know that they lost. They got shut out last week, but they only gave up, 14 points because 2 of the points was off of the safety. So they only gave up 2 touchdowns. They forced a couple turnovers. I'm looking for this defense to really dominate up front on each level. I'm going to go with Suffern. I think they rebound and win this game.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think Suffern's defense is going to have to take control. I feel like they're going to have to give their offense a lot more availability, a lot more chances at scoring. The offense, like you said, needs to limit the turnovers, be efficient, drive down the field, get some points, because the defense, I feel like, is going to step up big time here. I'm going to go with Suffern.
Let's go to the next. This one's a very intriguing one, too. Mamaroneck 3-1 at Carmel, who's 3-1. Interesting game here. Carmel at home. I think it's their homecoming as well. Mamaroneck, they're going to have to make some plays in the passing game. Running against Carmel is very difficult. unless you have the size. Now, I do think this offensive line has some good size to it and have been impressive this year. So it's going to be really important for them to try to dictate things. But this is going to be a game where Mackey is going to have to play like Superman. He was efficient last week, 13 of 18, had over 300 total yards and 4 touchdowns. He's going to be really important for them. He has to limit turnovers. That's going to be a big thing. There's a lot of pressure that Carmel creates from the outside and also from the inside with some linebacker stunts. But this defensive line is big. So this offensive line has its hands full with them up front. But Mackey can make some plays, and Smeal is another guy at the wide receiver spot. They're going to have to make some big plays to him against the secondary, who hasn't really been pushed since John Jay's Fishkill, right? So last week, Austin couldn't really throw the ball. So interesting to see that. On the defensive side, slowing down the run game is going to be important. Carmel's big. They have multiple guys who can run the ball. This linebacking crew is going to be tested to its fullest from Amerenik. And when I look at Carmel, we know about the strong rush attack. They play good complementary football. They have a strong rush attack, and then they play strong defense, right? And ever since the Arlington game, they have limited big plays. And that's going to be really important to continue. On the offensive side of the ball, Nunez has been a force running the football, had a strong game last week. We know about Werlau and Venables, who is a nice combination running the football. They can do some zone, they can do some power. And then at the wide receiver spot, Abel was a nice target for them, but you know about Santiago is that big target wide receiver. They got playmakers at each level, which is important for this offense. But Ken, again, if they get limited running the ball, have we seen them do enough in the passing game, just step back and throw? We have not. But there hasn't been teams so far that have limited the run game. So it's going to be interesting there. Defensively, generating a pass rush is going to be huge for this team. They've done a really good job of that with Forrester and Robles and some of their DNs that have made big plays and using some of the stunts that they use. And Risley has really been all over the field. I've been impressed with him the last couple of weeks watching him. Made a whole bunch of tackles. He's going to have to play a big game as well. With all that said, I do think Carmel at home wins this game. I think their physicality, their ability to control the football is going to be huge. I do think Amerenik will move the ball at times, but I do think Carmel, with its size, limits enough of the big plays by Mackey, and Carmel wins this game.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree. I feel like Carmel's defense has been performing better. I feel like their rush offense has just been so efficient, and their offensive line has really been stepping up. And I feel like that it's going to be really tough for Amerenik to slow down this rush offense. And it's really going to be up to their front, really step it up and really try to at least try to like limit what Carmel could do best, right? Like you said before, Carmel has to still prove that they can pass the ball as efficiently as they used to do. But, I don't feel like they're going to need to really do it. I feel like this game is going to be Carmel's rush offense, and I feel like they're going to do really well. So I'm going to go with Carmel here.
Last 2 games, Morris, Yonkers Brave 0-5 at Mount Vernon, who's 1-3. Yonkers Brave got pushed around a little bit, gave up a lot of rushing plays last week. Look for Mount Vernon to use its size in this one and also run the ball. But they gave up a lot of plays on defense. So interested to see which defense really steps up this week. I'm going to go with Mount Vernon to win their home. I think that gives them a little bit of the edge. I'm going Mount Vernon.
Yeah, Mount Vernon's offensive line is going to be big boys up front. They'll be pushing guys around. At home gives them the advantage. I'm also going to go with Mount Vernon.
Last game, March Yonkers Forest 3-2 at Ossining, who's 1-4. This is a league game. Really interested on this one with Yonkers Forest's ability to run the ball. They threw the ball much more. They threw the ball well last week. Now they got to get back to running the football. Fields had 3 touchdowns. We know about Aquino, who was a big play threat for them. Ossining did struggle to stop the run last week. Look to see if Yonkers Forest can make those plays. On the other end, Yonkers Forest has to limit the rush game, and Ossining does a really good job of running the football. Even though they struggled against Carmel, look for them to have a much better game running the football this time around. This one's a tough one for me, but I think Yonkers Forest makes enough plays in the passing game, generates some big plays that Ossining really struggled to throw the football. And so if they can't run the ball and make some big plays out of the run game, can they make enough plays in the pass game? I don't think they can. I'm going to go with Yonkers Forest.
Yeah, I'm also going to agree with you. I feel like Yonkers Forest is definitely going to have a kind of more well-rounded game from the pass offense and rush offense and pass offense. So I feel like they're going to have a more balanced game, a balanced one where they're going to control the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. Defense is going to have to step it up and really try to limit what Ossining can do, especially with how well they run the ball. So I feel like Yonkers Forest is going to kind of step into Ossining and they're going to win the game. It's going to be a tough road trip, but it's going to be a close one, but I feel like Yonkers Forest is going to win here.
All right, that was all the games, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I don't think we have any pending questions left, so we will close it out there. Thank you guys again, and before you guys leave, if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you like this kind of content. We always appreciate you guys, as always. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't worry if you miss anything. We'll be posting this on the channel. But with that, we'll be signing off. See you guys.